Welcome to Los Angeles Data Platform. Today we have a presentation. It's Power Apps and Artificial Intelligence by Jeremy Frye, Senior Manager on Data Analytics, if I'm not mistaken, at Naviside. And our sponsor for today is our Data Driven Technologies Incorporated nonprofit. Without further ado, Jeremy, it's all yours now.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Sure.
My name is Jeremy Frye, as Steve mentioned. Thanks for everybody joining this evening. I run the data analytics practice for Navisite. I'm one of the professional services senior managers. And today we're going to be talking about Power Apps and artificial intelligence. I have a subtitle here called A Flow of Location Events because I'll also be using Power Automate and cognitive services in here as well. So we're going to really be covering a lot of the data platform from the Power platform standpoint, as well as, some Azure features as well. But before we get into it, a little bit about myself. I have over 12 years experience in SQL Server and data analytics. I started as a SQL Server database administrator, and then, as business intelligence really began to grow amongst our client base, I ventured more into that space, and then the practice just continued to build. And now we have an architecture and an engineering/development team run by myself and Dan King, who is a colleague of mine who also speaks in the community. I've been an active speaker in the community for quite a bit of time. I've been spoken at past Summit 3 times, and speak at SQL Saturdays all throughout the country. I've actually made it out to LA, so I may have seen or met you guys, before. I've been to LA a couple of years ago. Hopefully I get a chance to make it out again someday when coronavirus is over here and we can all get out of our houses. But yeah, I enjoy spending time with my family and being outdoors. I love outdoor activities. So here's my Twitter handle and my LinkedIn profile as well. If anybody, wants to link up after this, or if there's anything I can help with, if you have questions, I'm sure Steve will also be sharing this presentation as well on various platforms. But if I can answer any follow-up questions either after this presentation or, just in general, if anybody needs any data analytics help or work, or I know my team's also hiring as well. So if anyone's looking for an opportunity, definitely ping me on one of these platforms as well. So a little bit about the agenda, as I covered a little bit here. One of the things I like to do is I like to show an end-to-end solution first before we really pick it apart and dive into the development efforts that go along with it. I think it's extremely beneficial to show that first because, you want to understand what we're tearing apart. What will actually be looking at is Power Apps design. So a lot of the logic is built in Power Apps. We'll be, doing a deep dive. I won't be able to cover every single aspect of Power Apps in the various expression languages and things that I'm using to build it, but I do have slides that have recaps of code. So it really will break down all of the various pieces of the different screens that are in the Power App. So as we share this presentation, you should be able to follow along if you wanted to create something like that. We'll also be talking about Power Automate. So we'll be doing some process automation in here, not necessarily robotic process automation, but really just a trigger or functionality that happens based upon, something that a location event that happens in the Power App application itself. Then we'll be taking it one step further where we'll be looking at how to apply artificial intelligence and marry that also with Power Apps. And that's where we'll be using cognitive services, to do a Bing entity search. So when we think about applications, I'm sure everyone here on this, if I was in a physical standpoint, I would ask a raise of hands if you're a developer or a SQL Server database administrator. However, all of us deal with some sort of application, whether if we're managing it on the back end or if we're using it, in a computer, on a computer at the job. We also now venture into a lot of mobile devices, tablets, etc. So apps are everywhere. And so what Microsoft has done with Power Apps is they've kind of of brought that back-end database mentality into, easy app design that can incorporate with a database. And that's what we're going to be showing here today. So what is Powerapps? It's an application development solution. It is accessible via web browser as well as mobile devices. The two views that you can create Powerapps in are like a tablet view, or some people use that as a desktop view as well as a mobile app view. One of the big things and benefits that I'll cover later that I'll probably repeat is one of the huge benefits of using Powerapps is the various data points and out-of-the-box connectors, and then the ability to also create custom connectors. So the flexibility is great when it comes to the Powerapps when you need to handle certain business functionality. Just wanted to give a brief overview. One of the questions I really get asked quite a bit is the cost of licensing. And typically you can get by with running a single app, which is $10 a month, similar to like a Power BI license. There's flexibility, and I have another slide that I'll get to next, which I actually will break down some of the functionality and limitations between the two. The $40 per month is more of like a P1 or P2 license, I should say, and it's more for running multiple apps. So if your business is extremely heavy on running a lot of different Power Apps and you have users that need to run multiple apps, then the per user per month is probably the way to go to run unlimited apps. Just a quick breakdown here. As I mentioned, the per app plan, which is the $10 a month, you can actually have 2 active apps at a time. So you can have multiple apps, but you can only have 2 active at a time, and you only get 1 portal, whereas the per user plan is unlimited apps. Also, the real big benefit of using the per user plan for the $40 a month is the capacity if you use the common data service. Now they call that the, I think it's the Dataverse, Microsoft's Dataverse. So really it's just the capacity sizes if you do use, out of the box database, common data service. So
Jeremiah?
Yes.
Quick question.
Sure.
Does Powerapps actually replacing web development?
No. Powerapps does have its limitations. It does not replace web development. I think it has its use cases when you need to do small types of apps, but if you need to do enterprise level apps where, like you need to build an ERP system, different things like that, very complex apps, I mean, that still does not replace, a software development team, to be completely honest.
Got it. So essentially Powerapps is for something simple?
I mean, you can do pretty complex things with it. It's pretty flexible, but usually, at least for my use case, I'm sure that, I don't know every app that was built, but I typically see like CRM type apps. I've seen apps that can handle like budgeting type things. I've seen apps that are comparable to like Salesforce to track opportunities and accounts. Obviously, it's not as robust from like a reporting standpoint. I mean, there's various modules and components to very complex apps. And so I would say that, the development effort would be extremely great to do something like that in Powerapps. However, I have seen pretty complex Powerapps. It really depends on your use case and how widespread you want that to be.
Got it. And essentially Powerapps is cloud only, right?
Correct. Yes. And one of the other things too is if you're heavy on mobile apps, this isn't it. Like when you build a Power App, you cannot publish a Power App as its own individual app in like Google Play Store or the Windows, the Apple App Store. You have to actually download the Powerapps app from the store, and then you sign in because it's organizational based. That's the other thing as well, is it's typically tied to some sort of a work or email account. So it's not as open source as maybe some other web or app development is.
Okay, so this is essentially inside organization website.
Correct, yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And by the way, I forgot to ask you, but which way do you prefer people to interrupt you, ask questions, or drop them in the chat, and I can citadels, or you have some common places, or maybe towards the end you want all the questions?
It doesn't matter. I would say if, I'm a type of a person where, it depends on, I'm scatterbrained. So, my brain goes in 10 different directions. So if someone, feels that they may forget, feel free to interrupt me. I would say to keep pace if we can, to hold questions to the end. But I may stop and pause for questions here and there. But I mean, we're kind of in a non-formal setting, informal setting with, I'm not under a specific time constraint. So if you want to, feel free to interrupt me, that's totally fine. I'm not offended by that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. So one of the use cases that I wanted to leverage with Power Apps, and you may not need something like this, but I work with a lot of transportation management companies, and I also, in this day and age, we use our phones to get everywhere. When we don't know where we're going, we use Google Maps, etc. So I wanted to actually simulate my use case, and this is what our app is going to break down today, is simulating a delivery driver. I'm sure everyone in this, meeting today has ordered from Amazon and got things delivered. I'm sure that you've ridden an Uber or Lyft, or at least know someone who has. You've had packages delivered maybe from UPS, FedEx, etc. Or maybe you work, in transportation management, and you know that there's various TMS systems to track routes and track deliveries of drivers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the things that I wanted to kind of test Power Apps limit on. Again, this is really just to showcase a specific use case example of Power Apps to really show the possibilities that you could use it for. But feel free to experiment with Power Apps yourself and build whatever apps, that you may feel are beneficial to you personally or for your organization. So I'm going to go into an end-to-end demo. Also, because this is a mobile app and this is a transportation management style app, I would like to try to demo this from my cell phone. So give me a minute to try to pull up and broadcast my phone here. And in the meantime, I can take questions if anyone has any while I'm setting everything up here. Okay.
Hi, I just have a quick question. My name is Eric, and I kind of just wanted to get your overall feeling of low code versus no code versus like bigger software development type of situations.
Yeah, sure. I mean, me personally, I'm an architect and developer at heart, so I don't mind getting my hands dirty. But I'm whatever, to me, it's whatever can deliver the solution and whatever the budget calls for. I mean, obviously, I think to do some pretty robust things in Power Apps, and you'll see, is you have to have some sort of expression language or code. So I don't think you can shy away from that in any setting. Personally, I think it makes things more personable when you can actually code and create your own little nuances of how things work and how things are directed in an app. So personally, I like a little bit of both. I'm the best of both worlds kind of a guy. As quickly as I can get an app delivered, if there's some drag and drop, point and click type things, but also for proper customization, I like to actually get my hands dirty with code.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right. And let me know if you, I don't think it's actually broadcasting correctly. Give me 1 second. All right, nothing like technical difficulties. Give me 1 second here. And if I can't show it on my phone, it's no worries. I can just do it from the designer. It's just sometimes it just puts it in a more real life context to do it this way. All right, let's try one more time. All right, there we go. Is everyone able to see my screen? For some reason, every time I open the app, it doesn't work. All right, no worries. I will. All right, so I'll do it a different way. So here is Powerapps, and I'll just kind of give a brief overview. There's two different types of apps. As you can see here, there's a Canvas app and there's a model-driven app. And so from that standpoint, we're actually using the Canvas app. Model-driven apps are more, to the gentleman who just asked the question, are more non-code based. And it's you kind of build it off of a model, whereas a Canvas app is more like a blank canvas, and you can customize the app however you like. So typically model-driven apps are more specifically used for like CRUD applications, for just very basic things, for updating, deleting, just one screen type things. You can add a couple of different screens, but there's not a lot of customization. Whereas Canvas apps are more of, a blank sheet where you can, really customize from scratch. So that's what we're actually going to show. So this is called Find My Location. And this is pretty, self-explanatory. As I mentioned, one of the features is common data service. And so over here is where you can select data, and here's where you can actually create tables. It's like its own database. And this is where if you weren't tying your Power App, if you didn't need to interact with a SQL Server database or something like that, you could actually have a built-in common data model here. And then you can use this across multiple apps, or you can deploy it as a whole entire solution somewhere, and manage the data directly from here, and not actually step outside of the Power Apps application for your data. But let's dive into it so I can show the end-to-end solution. So what we'll do is we're just going to hit play. And I may have to simulate a couple of things since I can't show it from the phone. Give me 1 second here. So essentially, as you can see, this comes up and it says, it's asking me to use my location, because this is going to use my location. So I'll allow. I'm actually on the East Coast. I'm outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so as you can see here, just to kind of step through, I can choose my terrain here. So I can choose aerial. It will change this map and how I'm viewing this. So I can zoom the whole ways in, and this is actually, showing my home, right now. I could zoom the whole ways out, and obviously you guys are somewhere over in this area. But you can see the functionality here that I have a map control. I can look at roads, and, again, same thing. I can do labels. There's just all kind of different things that this drop down can do. You can look at light or dark canvases, etc. If you think about Google Maps, for example, it will automatically, when it's nighttime, so it factors in time frames, it will make your map automatically default to like a dark canvas theme to indicate that it's at night. I don't have mine set up that way, but I could have flexibility to do that. I could also enter a destination here and show directions, right? So let me switch back to a road here, zoom in a little bit. And what I'll do here is there's a state park that's close to me. And before I actually step through this, I want to actually explain what this is going to do. So if you think about Google Maps, if I type in, a destination here, I can choose directions, right? I can choose driving directions, and there was really no good icon for like walking. So this is just more like of a user icon, just indicates for me walking. I could have imported my own image. And then once I start typing in here, I have functionality that will say, okay, this button's active now for me to show a route. What happens is when I show a route, it will go to another screen with a different kind of a map. These are actually called static maps. The static map is not a turn-by-turn direction map. In order for me to do something like that and actually make an equivalent to something like something like Google Apps, or Google Maps, I should say, I would need to reference an SDK. I just recently heard earlier last year, that there is the functionality to utilize SDKs in Power Apps. So I may end up taking this app and trying to take it a step further and do a turn-by-turn type of a direction. But it really just shows the capabilities that Microsoft is providing in Power Apps to really use these apps for functional types of, utilization. So what I'll do here is, when I type this in and do a show route, it'll show me the distance that I'm going to be traveling to get there. And then I'm supposed to, what I've triggered this to be is, if I was a delivery driver and I'm using this and I want to deliver something to, whoever I'm delivering my package to, or whatever cargo I'm carrying, right? I wanted to send them a text message when I'm within 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so many miles away. So essentially that is better customer service for my customer to say, okay, my driver is pretty close. I need to make sure like I'm home, or, I can go by the door and wait because my package is getting ready to be delivered. So that's going to trigger a Power App to send that text message. And then obviously these buttons here give me the ability, if I was a driver and I'm making a trip, if I'm at lunchtime or dinner time and I want to like look at restaurants near me. So it's kind of the same concept as when you're on Google or a Google apps, or just a web browser, and you type in restaurants near me or something near me. It's using an entity search and your location services to then pull back various information, that pertains to your location. And this actually will use cognitive services in Azure. So just wanted to kind of explain that before I step through it all and confuse anyone. But we'll break all of this down, shortly. So there's a state park close to me. It's called Point State Park. And it's actually State Park. So I can zoom in, and it's at downtown Pittsburgh. So if I actually show an aerial view, downtown Pittsburgh, you can actually see this is where the Pittsburgh Steelers NFL football team plays. This is where the Pittsburgh Pirates play. So Point State Park is actually a little park here where the three rivers of Pittsburgh meet. And so I just wanted to, show in here that I actually can type an address, or I can type a landmark, and it actually will find that. So now if I click driving directions and then I click show route, now it shows me that I'm about 17.2 miles away from that. And, here's my directions. And well, not directions, but here's the route map that it's showing me. It's not giving me a turn by turn. And then it's going to take me about 26 minutes to get there. Now, since I can't demo this on my phone, I can't show and put in a location that shows when I'll be within like 10 minutes, and it will send me a text message. But I'll show that logic and how that's actually configured. And actually, I just got a message on my phone that tells me that. Actually, I think I programmed it for less than 30 minutes just because I knew about how far that distance was. Maybe I'll broadcast to my phone and actually show that I received that text message. But for sake of time, I'll keep, continuing through this. So I have that information. And then say I wanted to say restaurants near me. I live in this city here called Monroeville. And so in Monroeville, I can say, let me see restaurants near me. So what that should do, that's not working. Maybe let me try restaurants near destination. All right, that's not working. So I may have to troubleshoot that. That should have taken me, this button should have been able to pass in my location and give me some restaurants close to here. And this button should have gave me some restaurants close to here, but I'll have to come back and troubleshoot that. But that is typically end-to-end what this application will do. If I wanted to enter a different destination, if I literally typed in, the Space Needle in Seattle, it will literally find the Space Needle in Seattle from an aerial view. So if I did a show route again here, this will calculate, and obviously that's an extremely long trip. So, you know, this map and the distance and everything is working. I'm not 100% sure what's going on here, but I'll double check that. So kind of any questions before I go on, and I'll break down the logic and how all of this is working, but I at least wanted to show the end-to-end final solution, just so when we start breaking this down, you kind of understand the various pieces.
This is Steve. So you're showing a simulation of a mapping app, right? So from A to B, and maybe restaurants as well.
Correct. Yes.
And this is essentially the product is going to be a Power App. An app inside the Powerapps app, I guess.
Correct. So when I deploy this or publish this, and here, matter of fact, I can actually show that. Give me 1 second. Let me broadcast back to my phone. So if I go into my text messages here, you can see here, this was my personal email. And I have it being sent from an email. So that's why it's coming from there, because I could have, and I'll talk about this later when I talk about Power Automate, but you can see that it was a 26-minute drive. And it says your delivery will arrive within 30 minutes. So that was the text message that Power App sent me based upon the text box in there that told me that I was about 26 miles away. So you can see that that Power Automate function did work. And that's why I kind of wanted to show it from the phone, because you would have seen it almost near real time come up when that, you know, destination was hit. Not sure why the cognitive services piece isn't working, but I'll as I'm showing that, I can try to troubleshoot that as I'm showing it. But at least, if anything, I'll hopefully be able to, you know, show you how it's configured. But yes, to your point, Steve. Give me 1 second here. So if you can see here, here's Power Apps itself. It is the app. So if I actually go into, and I'm using Android, but if I go into Google Play Store and I type in Power Apps, you can see that it is an app already on here, right? And you would just download this and then you sign into your organization. For some reason, when I actually use this, I don't know why it does that to me, but give me 1 second. It's not gonna work stuff. It won't show me for some reason the Power App. I'm not sure why it just blocks it out there, but yeah, that's strange. But
so essentially it's like a Power BI app, right? You download the app, the Power BI or the Power App, and you are deploying your own app inside that Power BI or Power Apps app.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly how it works. So Google Maps, as we talked about, it has some similar functionality to Google Maps, but it is not a replacement for Google Maps because it does not provide turn-by-turn directions. As you can see for Google Maps, you can search nearby restaurants. That's kind of the same concept here. You could also look for gas stations and other various, you know, items here. I could configure mine to have these various options as well. Like I said, the only thing that I cannot get it to do out of the box using a static map is do a turn-by-turn direction where it literally, you know, is stepping me in real time through the directions to where I'm trying to get to. But as I mentioned, even Google Maps, they call SDKs to do that. So right now, you know, I think there is the ability to do that. I just haven't had the time to really dive into that aspect of it. But I have, as I mentioned, seen last year that functionality was available. So looking into the future, As I mentioned, I come from more the backend database platform standpoint of being an administrator and a developer. And then you also have your application developers and those who, are on that side of the house, right? But I feel like Power Apps is bridging a gap between the two. And to the gentleman's point earlier, to create these apps, you don't have to really have a lot of coding background. It's not using Java or C or anything like that to build these. It's not using Python. You can incorporate some of those languages with different, add-ons and different things that can call. But like, for example, if you call an SDK, you may have to, embed some sort of like JavaScript or something that can call that. So there is some flexibility to tap outside of, the regular expression language that it's using. But it really is, a canvas for you to drag and drop various items and then configure the usability of those items based upon expressions and different things. So as I mentioned, we'll dive a little deeper into that. And then, it has the ability to call out. So essentially it's calling cognitive services, as I mentioned, but it's really just calling cognitive services is essentially just an API that, that it's being called that will retrieve some JSON information, and it's, pre-configured algorithms and different things from a machine learning standpoint that's, obviously doing all the heavy lifting. So again, that ties back into less coding and more functionality that can be used. So some pros and cons, as I mentioned, this is my favorite. There's tons of connectors out of the box that you can use. I come from a programming background from business intelligence. So when I think of things like ETL tools and making connections to various APIs and various, database platforms, sometimes you have to, jump through various hoops to get certain connections to work, right? There's a ton of out of the box connectors in Power Apps that allows you to just seamlessly integrate. And then, as I will show for cognitive services, there's some cognitive services APIs that are out of the box and already ready to use with Power Apps. But the Bing entity search, for example, that we're using will need a custom connector. So again, it does have the ability to do custom connectors. The expression language is extremely easy to use, and I have some reference slides that will really dive into some of the logic and how that Power App is built. But I'll also, show some of that as well when I dive into the studio section of Power Apps where you develop. And then, as I mentioned, you can integrate with other tools. We're integrating with Power Automate. We're tying in cognitive services. We're also writing data to a backend database every minute of the current location of the driver. And I also had some difficulties. I think they changed my SQL administrative password, so I can't actually, query that data to show you how it's writing in real time. Like, well, every minute I have it writing, but I'll show you how it's configured to do that. So that is useful for if I am, if I do work for a TMS system, right? I can actually track my driver. So maybe, I want to look at how long it's taken individuals to go on certain routes or where they currently are, because every minute I can query my database, or I may have a Power BI report or some sort of a report that shows me, or maybe even streams into Latitude and Longitude locations and shows me all of my drivers on the map in real time. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility with Power Apps. And as I mentioned, there's mobile and desktop design. I'm showing a mobile app. A desktop design, is you develop kind of the same way, but the canvas, the layout is just a little different. And it's a low cost license fee. As I mentioned, you have the $10 and the $40. Some of the cons is the design's not interchangeable, meaning that because I started developing a Canvas app in a mobile setting, I can't do all kind of logic and build everything and then change it to like a tablet or desktop design. It's not interchangeable that way. I'm hoping that they change that. And if they have changed that, maybe I just haven't come across it yet. The logic can be extremely complicated for multi-layered apps. And this is where we start talking about, is Power Apps really the right solution for you if you're doing extremely heavily robust apps and you're not really a app developer? Because when you start trying to carry values and different things across different screens, and your apps can get extremely complicated. And I'll also discuss some techniques when I dive into this a little further as well. As I mentioned, it's tied to a work or organization email or a school email, and so it does not give you the ability, for example, to take your app and deploy it, as Steve, as you were mentioning. You need the Powerapps app just like you need the Power BI app, and then all of your apps are within that, tied to your organization. So that doesn't have that flexibility yet, or at least I haven't heard of that functionality yet. And then kind of piggybacking off that same concept, it can't be deployed to an app store. And you can only run one app at a time. You can have multiple active apps, but you can't run 2 different apps at a time because it is using the Powerapps app. So if you have 5 apps in your Powerapps organization, you can only be running one at a time. You'd have to close one and open the other one. So that's the other downside as well. So let's dive a little bit into the logic of how this Power App is built. So I'll step back into here, and instead of going into my play, I'll just go into edit here. So this will open up the Powerapps Design Studio. And there's a ton of logic in here. I don't have enough time to go over it all, but we'll be able to cover some of it. And as I mentioned, there's some reference slides coming up here when we get back to the presentation side of the house that we can, I can show you. And if it's a little hard to see, just speak up. So the first thing that we'll talk about is naming conventions. And this is where, as I mentioned, it can be extremely complicated for multi-layers. So for me, when I need to insert something, right? If it's a label, if it's a button, if it's a text box, if it's some sort of an input, a combo box, a drop down box, which is essentially what this is right here, which is a drop down. I usually, if it's a gallery, and unfortunately, because I wasn't able to get the cognitive services, when I clicked restaurants near me, a gallery would show up that there's a list of restaurants. I name my items according to that. And so if you look here, I have multiple screens. This is my main screen, so I'm looking at a tree view here, and then I have a route map screen. So from my main screen, once I actually click show route, when I enter the destination here, it would route me to this screen, which then brings up my static map that shows that route, and then it obviously has the distance and the travel time. Now you'll see red X's here, and that's just because it doesn't have a location, so it can't populate a value, so it just won't suppress that error in the design studio portion of it. And then my third screen is my gallery, which is where it does the cognitive services, and it will show a list of restaurants. I'll see if I can maybe fix that, but hopefully at worst case, you'll at least be able to understand how it's configured. And I have a feeling I know what's wrong because I have several different Azure tenants, and it may just be pointing to the wrong tenant. So to step through a little bit more, this is simply just a drop down. As I mentioned in my main screen, I preface all of my naming conventions with what type of an item it is. So if it's an icon, I have it listed as an icon. You may be able to tell over on the left-hand side by the image of what it represents, but for me, I like to spell it out, especially if I'm doing this as a collaborative app with another developer. I want to make sure I'm labeling everything accordingly. So I have an icon that is an erase, right? I have an icon that's a check. This isn't really necessary in my app, and I didn't show this in real time when I was demoing this, but this helps me show and hide various things that I'll actually demo and show you here for troubleshooting mechanisms. So that's what those are for. But as you can see here, here's my icon for walking, right? Here's my icon for driving. So when I look over here, I know when I click on something, obviously it will highlight, and you can see this is something that's actually hidden. If I click on my wrench to show that, then it'll show me what this is. But really, I can't stress enough how critical it is to name things accordingly, because it really helps you when you need to navigate between different screens. And one of the big things about Power Apps is referencing other items. When you need to have a button reflect or show gray when it's not clickable. And then when it is clickable, that's based upon some sort of an expression value that's based upon something else that's happening within the app, right? So when I start typing a destination, that makes my show route button come up. So that means that my show route button has to reference this text box. So I need to know in my code what this is actually called. So it's called text input location. So that makes it a lot easier for me to understand. Of course, you use your own naming convention to your discretion, but I just really wanted to stress the fact of how important it is, especially when you start loading your screen with a whole bunch of different logic. The next thing I want to show here is a static map, right? And really, I'm just calling a URL. And then, as I mentioned, in order for me to know what location I'm at and to be able to zoom in and all of the different features that I showed here, I'm calling all kind of different other things that are on my screen. So I'm calling in order for me to showcase like what map I'm showing, right? Am I showing an aerial view? Am I showing a street or road view? That is this drop down being image sets to, right? So when I click here, that's my drop down being image sets, right? And it's just literally an array of values in a drop down. So that's hard coded, but it will also reconstruct when I select here my whole entire URL to tell me what I'm showing on my static map. I'm also doing an encoded URL based upon my text input location because this is a text, right? It has to encode that into the URL. So that's why I'm wrapping that. And this is just basically concatenating multiple values. I won't break down every single thing here, but I do have code reference in the slide. So that's how this is able to determine when I click and show different things. It's basically being constructed from other values that are on my screen. The other thing that I wanted to show here is how to use like variables. When you use variables, and if I come back out, oops. So here's the different values that I have. So if you could see when I had chosen my colors, or I'm sorry, when I had selected like driving directions or walking directions, it would show green or gray. Like, so here's my color values, right? This place is a value that I carry from a different screen. So when you need to carry values to different screens, and like I click driving directions and then click show route and it took me to another screen, I needed to carry over driving to my next map to show like, hey, I'm not giving a distance that's walking distance, I'm giving a distance that's driving. So I had to pass that driving value over to my next screen. You can only do that with variables. And so my transportation mode of driving is what is selected as a variable. These are global variables. Now there's variables that can be tied to different screens as well, but I try to keep everything global if I can. That way I can use it depending on if I'm scaling this app to do other things and adding various screens. So I really want to highlight that as well. Stepping into another screen real quick, the route map screen. Here's another. Now this isn't showing anything because there's no location here. But this is doing the same thing as you can see here. This is taking that variable transportation mode. So this tells me if I need to show driving directions or if I need to show walking directions. But you get the same concept here, my latitude and longitude. One thing I did want to show here is if I click this, you can see that I have various things that just showed up, right? If I click the erase button, it goes away. So this is more for my own troubleshooting. Here's my latitude and longitude coordinates. So again, here's my expression language, right? It's just location.latitude. Here's my location.longitude. If I come in here, this is another expression language. Here's where I'm actually calling my Bing Maps connector, and I'm doing a get route, and then I'm using my location, latitude, longitude, and my input location, and then I'm grabbing, like I'm saying that I want my distance to be in miles. I could have did kilometers, and then my transportation mode is whatever was passed through that I clicked on my previous screen. So again, it's really, you can see how this can get extremely cumbersome. when you have a lot of different logic because you have various items that reference other items. I mean, I could really spend a ton of time going over all pieces of the logic here. The last thing I really wanted to show is these couple of things here. I have timers. So on this timer, for example, this is how I'm determining how often I want to write a record, where in this case, my location and my latitude and my longitude location of my driver that you use in this app to a database. And so over here, I have various, this is in milliseconds. So right now I have it every 10 seconds, it's gonna write, right? So if I come up here and on timer end, I have a patch command. This patch command is just basically saying I have a connection called location services. All it is an Azure SQL Database connection. So if I come back, and if I'm jumping around, just stop me. But if I come back to my data sources, here's my DBO location services, and it's in transportation and logistics, right? And I can't actually show that, but you can see here, here's all of my connections that are my data sources here. So here's my various entity searches. Here's my route map. Here's another Bing Maps. I also have some custom data sources in here that I'll show. But essentially what I'm showing here is on timer end, what I'm doing is I'm calling my location services connection. I'm saying use defaults if I have them. And then I'm passing in my input location that was typed in, and I'm passing in my latitude, and I'm passing in my longitude, and I'm doing the timestamp of now. So every 10 seconds, I'm writing that to a database. To show you that really quickly, cancel. I'm using, this is just Azure Data Studio. Oh, I'm in the wrong tenant. Sorry. You can use Management Studio or whatever your tool choice is. And then here's my transportation and logistics. Oh man, hang on. Oh man, I'm getting stage fright typing.
You can do it.
There we go. All right, so in here, here's my location services. So if I just do a select top 1000, oh man. Wait. I don't know why that's not working. I don't know. I can't, it's not working, but I'll at least show you here. I have an identity column that just basically increments by one. Here's my input location, latitude, longitude, and then my log time. For some reason, I'm not sure why. That is strange. I've never seen that, but it's saying the login failed, but I don't know. Seems like, let me try one more time. Nah, it's not working. But essentially, that's what's happening. Is it's writing.
Jeremiah, so Uday is suggesting that you can write a query in a query window instead of relying on Azure Data Studio to create the top 1000 records. Maybe you can just write a query.
Yeah, I can try. Do a. Sorry. Yeah, see, it's not even connecting for some reason. Hang on. Let me try again. Yeah, something else is going. I think they might have changed the password because I had the same issue in a different tenant, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I apologize about that. But this is essentially how you would write that insert statement. You can also use patch to update as well. So if we need to do an update, you could use this patch command as well. So it's very useful when you need to write out to a database. But I'm essentially, that really shows the scalability and flexibility of this app, because not only is this usable on so many levels from an end user standpoint who's using the app, and then incorporating Power Automate to then send an alert. And then on top of that, I'm also writing to a database. And so that's one of the features and functionalities. Obviously, you won't have customization to do something like that with like Google Maps. So, really the flexibility of using Power Apps, for something like this could be extremely beneficial. And it may be something that a TMS, if someone really spent the time to elaborate on this app, could be something that could a TMS, transportation management type company could use. Any questions before I dive back in? I will go through the Power Automate and cognitive services piece, but I at least wanted to really just show how some of these things are configured in some of the key points here. So any questions before we jump back over? Okay, we'll jump over. I don't know if someone's speaking. I can kind of hear something, but I don't. It's
I
very.
can ask you a question. How much time
sure.
it took you to create your first app?
I just did a basic budget app, the first app I created, so it maybe took me an hour. It wasn't too bad.
Got it.
Yep. This app was a little bit more intricate. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I just only showed a few different things. But as I mentioned, here's some code design. And this may actually give you some perspective on some of the complexity behind this. This really is just a reference to show, like, if you wanted to do something like this, here's an example of what things look like. And then obviously, here is an example of a string of a URL that I put together that will result here. I do want to show one other thing really quickly, and I apologize if I'm jumping around here, but one of the things that you have to do here before you can use this, I'm actually using Bing Maps. I'm not using Google Maps, but regardless if you use Bing Maps or Google Maps, you have to have like a key. So really, here's how I have a link, and I do have a reference slide at the very end of my presentation that has links to various websites that show you how to configure different things like this. But you definitely need a Bing Maps key, and it's free. The only reason why I did not use a Google Maps key is because you have to actually pay for that, and then there's a cost per like however many times you make a call to that API. So essentially you need this, and then you also have to set your locate, like when you're running this from a browser for it to use your location like that, you have to allow Power Apps to use it. So essentially in Chrome, you just go into your settings, and then you go into privacy and security, and then from that standpoint, you can I have it to prompt me to always ask. And so when I go into Power Apps, it will prompt me to do that. And once I click OK, it will then add that to my list. So I just wanted to at least show that aspect of it as well. Here is an example of the route map. And then here's just some various things that I have in the expression language used for it. I did show the drop down. It's just literally a list of items, so it's an array. I do have, for my screen to load, there's all kind of different things you can select. So like on visible, it just is a collection, right? So it shows different things from there. I can do an update context. So an update context is essentially a call that my toggle location. So that was like, there was an on and off button that I could toggle my location services on and off. It just defaults on screen load to true. So as I showed too, the text input box and variables for location coordinates is just location.latitude, location.longitude, except I do have some aspects where I was doing like down here for my map coordinates. Well, sorry about that. I have this open cage data get geo coordinates. This actually was a custom connector that I used, and I actually built this Power App before they actually had an out-of-the-box Bing's map connector. So that's why I was using this initially. And then literally like a month or two after I created it, Microsoft released the data connector, which obviously made it a whole heck of a lot easier to do it. I didn't have to configure a custom connector, but I at least wanted to show that as well. So Power Automate is essentially another part of the Power Platform accompanied with Power Apps, Power BI. It's really just a workflow process management type of a tool. So you can schedule stuff. You can like on a set schedule to run almost like a SQL agent job. You can also, have it triggered by something, which as I showed you the text message when I broadcasted to my phone, I had it trigger based upon a value in the Power App. Once that value was hit, then I actually had it send a text message. So it's pretty powerful. And, it does give you the opportunity, like I said, for Power Apps to call something outside. So it's pretty inexpensive as well. It really depends on your use case. Right now I have the just per user plan, and it just essentially allows an individual user to create unlimited flows. If you need like a reserve capacity, almost like if you're familiar with Power BI and Power BI's premium capacity, then you may do like a per flow plan, where if you have unlimited users across an organization and you run a ton of different automated type functionality, where you need dedicated capacity, where your speed needs to be on your side, then depending on the number of users, the number of flows and Power Automate things that you have running, it may be more beneficial for you to go with this, depending on how many users, because obviously depending on users and you don't have dedicated capacity here, you may run into performance issues, or you just may have so many users that you do end up exceeding $500 anyway per month. And obviously that'd be a pretty large organization or pretty large user base. One of the things I do like about Power Automate is it comes out of the box with a whole bunch of different templates. So here's just an example and a screenshot, and you'll see this when I actually log in to Power Automate here to show. But you can actually start with a canvas that has these items already on it, and you just would go in and configure it to customize what you needed to do. But you can start with various templates here. So really quickly jumping over to the Powerapps demo. Or I'm sorry, Power Automate demo. So really kind of similar screen. You can also use common data services as well, and that's what this is here. Here there's various connectors, etc. But really what I wanted to show is, well, I can scroll through this really quickly. Here's a bunch of out of the box connectors. There's all kind of different things in here. And again, if there's something that's not in here, if you have an application you need to interact with that does not exist here, you can create custom connectors. And I'll show that as well once we get into the last portion of the demo, which is cognitive services. But really quickly, this flow is extremely simple. It's just this Power App send mail. As you can see here, 33 minutes ago, this was fired off. It actually fired off before 2 minutes as well, because I don't know why that fired off twice. Oh, I know why, because I hit the location and I hit change new location, so it probably fired off twice there. But you can see that was fired off. If I go into edit here, this is just basically saying it's triggered. There's nothing to configure here. This is just essentially saying it's triggered from Power Apps. And then I'll show in Power Apps how this is called. And that's one thing I didn't show, but I'll go back to that and actually demo that portion. One of the things here, as I showed in that text message, it was coming from my email account that I had set up for this. That was just a free way for me to send a message. I have a Verizon phone, so I was able to just send an email to my number at VZW text or something like that. And it basically, I can make it send me a text message through email. There's actually some different connectors in here for apps like Twilio and different things, or I shouldn't say apps, but services that can send text messages, but you just pay per text message, or however many, it's like 5 cents a text message or a cent a text message or something like that. So if you really needed to come from like a really specific number, I did it as, you know, a very generic way that was free to show the capability. But obviously, if I was rolling this out in more of a production level environment, I wouldn't do it that way. I would use some sort of a paid service that can send text messages and just call that API from here. This is extremely easy to show. I have, you know, custom phone numbers and stuff in here, so I won't actually go into this edit, but I do have a screenshot showing that on the demo slide as well. So you'll be able to see how it's configured there, but it's just literally that easy, 2 easy steps. Before I jump back into the demo, let me actually go back into Powerapps again though, so I could show this. So in the travel time, oh, I'm in the edit form. In the travel time here, I believe, and I'm trying to recollect my memory, I believe it is in the, I thought it was in the default. Give me a second to find it. Not on select, on change. All right, I'll find it in a second. Maybe it's not on that. Is it on this timer? Oh, sorry, I had it on the wrong thing. Okay, so this is actually on a timer as well. So the timer essentially, it's an if-else statement. So you can see, as I mentioned, it's within 30 minutes, or yeah, 30 minutes of travel time. So I just basically call this text box and I say, if this on timer end, and I believe this is on, sorry, I'm skipping around, I know. Let me go back to default just so I know how much time this is on. Where's the default? Oh, duration. So every 20 seconds on timer end, this is going to check, right, what this value is. I can make that timer whatever I want, but coming back to here on timer end, it's saying if the value is less than or equal to 30 and the notification is 0. So that's where this little shenanigans comes in here of this notification of 0. The reason I have that is because if you think about it, once I hit 30 minutes away, it's going to send that text message to my customer saying, hey, your delivery is within this amount of time. But being that this is checking all of the time for that, it's going to continue to send like every 20 seconds or however long I have this timer running for, right? So I have to have something that's not going to flood my customers with text messages until I arrive, like for 30 minutes. Like you're every 20 seconds or however many seconds it checks this value to send that message. So essentially what I have it doing is it has to be less than 30 and it has to have not sent a notification. So this is just a bit flag. And then if these two things are true, it calls the Powerapps send mail, which is what we have over here, Powerapps send mail. Right here. And then it just does a run and it's just a send. And then it sets the notification to 1, which means that it sent the notification. So that way, until I reset this and reset my location, like if I enter a new destination, this enter a new destination also sets that notification back to false. So I know that, okay, I've already, like, I'm going to a different place now. So I have to reset that, or else, you know, the next time I check this time, it won't, it thinks that I've already sent a notification because I'm in, you know, I'm still in that same old destination. So you can see how, you know, certain things can happen, you know, and this can get pretty convoluted because these items reference other items.
So Power Automate essentially it's used to be Microsoft Flow.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So coming back over here and some pros and cons. Let me talk about these first, and then I'll show you how that was configured. Interfaces well with other apps as we see it. It's interfacing pretty well. It's just a call out for, you just basically create a connector to Power Automate, and then you just call that the name of your Power App. It's extremely simple. And it simplifies, automated type tasks. So, it can take the guesswork out of, certain functionality, or it can make, certain small functionality like sending an email on some sort of a trigger standpoint or a value, just takes the guesswork out of things, and it provides some added functionality, to better the business. And it's easy design, and I'll show you that here, but it was literally only one task. It was a send mail task. I mean, you can do some pretty complex things as well, but for standard automated things, it's pretty, I configured that in like 1 minute. Like, it was pretty quick. And then some cons is that it's user based. So kind of same thing as it's user based, where like if I create that, I have to give permission for someone else to use it, or whatever. Like, you can share them, but it's not like, hey, everyone in the organization can see this. Like, it's just straight user based and not organization. It's tied to the organization, but it's security based to various people. So I guess that's a pro in itself as well, but it's just from a flexibility standpoint. If you have tons of different Power Automate type scripts, you really just have to manage a lot of the security behind it. And I guess it's better to be safe than sorry. So that probably should be a pro and not really a con. And then you can only develop a canvas, you can only develop one at a time for one user. So essentially, if I'm in that app and editing it, no one else can get in there and edit that at the same time, which, I guess that's, again, a pro, because you wouldn't want someone to do that. But say someone leaves something open, or someone leaves the company, that's where these types of situations can kind of hinder. And it's almost the same with Power BI. I actually had a situation, and not to deter from this, but I had a situation with Power BI where people were published into their, my workspace, and not like actual team workspace, and then they left the company and their user was shut down. So like, they lost all of the reports. So there's different pros and cons to that. So you can look at it both ways. And then you cannot share outside the organization. So it is organization based, just the same way Powerapps is. So this is essentially how I configured that. I just sent to a phone number at vtext.com, and that's, for Verizon carrier. I'm sure, T-Mobile, AT&T, whatever carriers have their own ways to send mail, but this was just an easy way. Initially, I had this for delivery within 5 minutes, but I knew the location that I wanted to use was within 30. So that's why I just changed my logic and, did different time. And that's it. It was literally this, and then it was literally like pulling over a send mail and then configuring what I wanted it to say, right? I also have a reference over here that shows what items on my screen on the actual Power App reflect or call this, or have some sort of correlation to it. So you can see that the travel distance and travel time, I could have made this fire off on time or distance. I had it fire off on distance. I could have did when the driver's within 5 minutes away or 30 minutes away. Like, there's all kind of ways I could have did it. And then here's the Power Apps call. This is an old, I didn't update this. Right now I'm only looking for less than or equal to 30, but this shows where I was doing some experimenting here, and I actually was doing like a between value. So this was because I was looking at, and I had to wrap it in a value statement because it's text. So obviously, if you need to compare numbers, you have to do some sort of a conversion. And then obviously my clear location will set that notification back as what I showed there as well. So pretty straightforward, but again, just, some easy expression language to configure certain things like that. So last but not least, is what I wanted to show for cognitive services. So this is just kind of really just adding, again, an added functionality here that would just be over the top, but it really just shows the scalability and flexibility of Power Apps. So what is cognitive services? It's a set of APIs and SDKs already with customized machine learning algorithms built in. And it just basically exposes those various APIs in a form that can be called from Power Apps or from any other application or any other tool in order to leverage the power of machine learning without actually building machine learning code. So we use the web search or an entity search here, but you can do vision APIs, speech APIs, language APIs. I actually have an OCR Power Automate thing that I did as well that calls the speech. I don't know if it's called speech or vision. I can't remember. I think the OCR was I think that was the speech API because it did no, I don't know if the speech does text. It's text to basically it translates text from like a picture. I think that's the vision API. I don't think that's speech. I can't remember, but I know the vision API also works with like your camera. So like I've seen people build Power Apps where they've used their camera in a Power App to take a picture and did like an image recognition type of a thing. So that's kind of cool as well. And the vision API is actually the one API that you can use out of the box in Power Apps that you don't need a custom connector for. But for some of these other ones, you actually have to do a custom connector that calls the API. Mentioned custom connector. It's literally a REST call. And this is just really showing the process that it goes through, right? It just calls a REST API and then it parses out the JSON, and then you can return those JSON values from the output of that into your Power App. Here's just some costs, and really it's based upon transactions, and each API is built differently, right? So you can see at the top, there's the Bing search one. You can get it's up to 250 requests. So a request is just a transaction or a call to that API, right? So you have the Bing web search, image search, news search, etc. They're all $7 per 1,000 transactions. So you can, if you ever need to do like a cost estimate, then you need to know like what you're actually using it for, and then how often it's going to actually be called, right? So that would help you understand cost estimates for something like that. So last demo here before we wrap up. I will go into here first to just kind of explain the Bing entity search. It uses a version 7 API, and essentially it calls an endpoint. It's extremely simple. It's just a GET request, and it takes different headers, right? So you actually need an API key. You can pass in what language. Here's the API key that you need. It's the subscription key that you create. When you create cognitive services in Azure, it gives you a subscription key. You have to use this in order to call. So if you've ever done any kind of ETL logic or anything where you have to call like an API, it's the same type of scenario. But really all we're going to be using is the subscription key and like the US market. Like we want to do a US market. So since we're doing an entity search, we're basically searching for like US language in the US market, but you can do other countries and different things as well. And this just kind of explains the various things and the query parameters. And that's the other thing we're going to do. As you can see, here's the market codes. We're going to call a various query in here as well. And the query is just going to be like what we're searching, and it's restaurants near us. So that's the query. So we could do all kind of different things. We could do, I'm just trying to think of other things, hair salons, anything you can search for, you can put that in a query string, right? You can search for places and entities. So when you actually go into cognitive services, it's literally if you're familiar with the Azure portal, you just essentially go to the marketplace, find Azure, find cognitive services, and then you basically determine, which cognitive services API you want to use. And then it gives you like the endpoint for that. So essentially in my keys and endpoints, I can click here and this is my endpoint and I can show keys, and this is what I would use to call that API. if I go back to the overview, oops, quick start, sorry. You can get started with the various APIs, right? So if I wanted to do an entity search, I can go here and that takes me to this link, which this is the link that I showed prior. Like this is the reference section to know how to configure that call. So, and you need, you know, an account in order to do that. So you need to have some sort of an Azure subscription to do this. But come in, and that's essentially all you do. There's really nothing else to it. There's nothing else to configure here. This is really the key here, is getting these endpoints. And I'm not going to show the keys just because, you know, anyone can grab these keys and call this. And then I don't want my Azure subscription to get billed, you know, not that anyone would take that, but just from a precautionary standpoint, that's the only reason why I'm not showing the keys. But going back into Powerapps, one of the things you can do is if I click on connections here, and I have all kind of different connectors, but the one that I really wanted to show, and this is the Bing Maps one, and you can see this is actually still in preview. This is the one that Microsoft released for like location and route maps, right? But you can also do, for my Bing entity search, here's this one. You can see I'm calling it is the Vision API, not the speech API for OCR. But let me step through how to create a custom connector. So when you come into a custom connector, or you create a custom connector, you have to have the API key. So here's where I would come into Cognitive Services, copy my key 1. I'm not sure why they give you 2 keys. I've never used key 2, so I don't really know why there's 2 of those. I never looked into that, but I always have used key 1. I'm not really sure why it's asking me for that, because I passed that in later, but I'll just click save. And maybe this is why it's actually not working. If I click edit, yeah, something may be wrong with this. And it won't allow me to edit it. Let me try to edit it from the custom connector section. All right, here we go. So you can upload your own image and show whatever you would like. I choose to do secure HTTP call, but then here is where my base API call is. So it's just, I'm calling, and that's the other thing too I forgot to mention, is you create the cognitive services in a specific region. So whatever region you're in, or that you want to create this in, then your base URI is always prefaced with that, and then it's api.cognitiveservices.microsoft or cognitive.microsoft.com, and then we're using a Bing entity search. So within the base URL, and this is why I felt it was critical to show this part of it. Let me scroll back up. This is using version 7.0, and then it's calling entities. So you can see here that that's where I actually got that from the configure. So when you come now into security, this is where you choose what kind of a definition you want. So we have an API key, and I'm actually showing the API key, but okay, it doesn't matter. So it's API key, it's in the header. So that's how it knows to call my cognitive services. And then in the definition, now you have to create an action. And in this action is a Bing entity search. And that's what all of this is. So here's where the query, and we're calling a market. So if we come back to here, oh, wrong one. If we come back here, we're calling Q for a query. That's our search terms. And this is what we're going to be specifying. This is just saying that in order for me to call that API, I have to supply this. So this is what we're going to actually supply from the Powerapps side, but the custom connector has to know that it needs to receive that. So that's where you get the queue and the market, right? So coming back into here, we also have at the header section, the subscription, which is the API call or the API key to the subscription. And then this is the location. So this is knowing like, okay, I need to pass in also in the headers my API or my latitude and longitude location. And then you have to know what your response is going to be. So your response, you basically import a sample response, and it'll basically, when you go through like the tutorial, it gives you the basic response of what you would get back from it. And then you import the example from that. And then it basically gives you all of the various body items that you can return in your response. And so in here, because it's a restaurant near me, I have address information here, the name, I have the postal code, what neighborhood it's in, the telephone number, the URL to their website, you know, all kind of different things in here that can be returned that now I can display based upon that value in Powerapps. So that's essentially it. And you have to basically save it before you can test it. I already have it saved, but it will test. But that's essentially all you have to do in creating a custom connector. So then how do you use this connector within Powerapps? So if we go back into Powerapps, into the edit functionality of this, and I click on, actually I do want to test that. I'll come back to that because I want to see if I can get this to work. But if I click here on select, it will then, oh, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry. It's restaurants near me. It's doing a set, and it's saying set place, which is a variable. See, when I highlight that, it's telling me that it's a variable. So I'm setting a variable. I'm calling the variable place. And then this is where I'm calling my Bing entity search.search. So this is my action. So if we come back into here, see here, it's calling search. And it's called, my connector is called Bing entity search. So that's where you get Bing entity search.search. And so coming back here, sorry, Bing entity search.search. So that's calling my connector and my action. My query is restaurants near me. My market is English and it's US. I could return other languages if I wanted to. Here's my subscription key again. Here's then I'm taking my latitude is coming from a text box. So again, it's coming from here, and I'm showing these now, but I technically will have these hidden in the app. And then the format needs to be latitude, semicolon, longitude. And so it's taking this one, and then it's closing all of that query, and then it's doing dot places dot value. And that's what will bring me all back my body values that are being returned from my JSON response. And then I'm navigating. So I'm calling that cognitive services. I'm writing all of those values back to this place variable. Then I'm saying, okay, on click of that, do all of this, but then also navigate to my entity search screen. I don't have a screen transition to fade or do anything. It's just a none. And then it's carrying my variable place through to the next screen. So this is a demonstration of why it's important to have global variables, because when you need to carry values between screens, when you click on a button, it goes to another screen. You need to carry a value over to that screen. You have to assign it to a variable. And so when we go over to that screen now, entity search screen, I have an entity gallery. And again, it's not showing anything. But if I click here, you can see that it's an array of items. And here I'm calling place, which is what I set. That was my variable that I carried from over there. And then within that, I have a restaurant search. So I make this a URL call, but I'm calling this item .web search URL. So if we go back to my custom connector again, as soon as I find it, right here, web search URL. So it's calling that. So that's what it will return, the website. Coming back here, if I go to restaurant URL, this is calling the .url. Phone number, this is calling .telephone. So you can see like I'm able to call like address locality. So this is basically giving me my whole address and the postal code. And again, all that's doing is sorry, I'm getting confused on which tab I'm on. That's all of these items that I'm just returning back. Let me test this because I actually want to see. Oh, okay, it's just going to make me test it from here, but that's okay. Let me see if this will work now. I'm gonna hide all that. So if I do Point State Park, restaurants near me. I don't know why that's not working. That's interesting because it's calling the right connector. Oh, wait. Oh, that's an easy fix. I want to test it from there because I don't know all the values. That was my problem. All right, that was an easy fix. It was just calling the wrong, and that's because I have too many tenants, and I probably was referencing a different tenant. Okay, so that should actually work now. One other thing too, which is cool, is there's version control in Powerapps. So I can click here and I can look at all of the different versions of this as well. This is my live version, but here's, different changes that I was making here when it was modified. So that's actually pretty cool as well, as there's version control built in. But to wrap up, because I know we're pretty much over time. Hang on, sorry. I don't want to publish that yet. So if I play it again now, type in Point State Park, and let's just go through the whole thing again. Show route, that works, 26 miles away. And let's say restaurants near me, and for some reason that still isn't working. That's so strange. Saving. Yeah, there's something finicky happening. No, that saved that one that time. But I'm not sure why this is still. Let me try to regenerate the key. I don't want to hold up the time too much longer, but I would like to show how this works. And it seems like it's a simple fix, but for some reason it's not showing. I think I know the problem. I may have to change it also in the custom connector as well.
My question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Is there a way to do kind of a global search, or do you have to remember everywhere where you have the key?
Yeah, good point. That's a very good question. Um, I I never have done a global search. I'm not saying there is a way or there's not a way. I'm not 100% sure, but that's a very
Okay.
good question. I will check on that. Um, but it just seems like a simple issue. Okay, that's taking that now. Let me see if
Thanks.
yeah, no problem. Okay, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I don't know why this isn't taking. Unless something's cached or something somewhere.
I do find it strange that you need to provide keys to internal Microsoft services, while Microsoft already knows your subscription.
Yeah, that's a good point because I am signed, and that's the other thing too. I agree because I'm signed in. I'm signed into this tenant. This is our data analytics tenant, and then if I go into here, I'm also signed into that same tenant. You're right, but I guess it matters because I could have multiple cognitive services. Um, I could have multiple ones out here, multiple APIs. So I could understand if you have multiple APIs, you would need to tell it which one to call. That would be the only reason I would expect that you would need this key. But I'm not sure why this isn't taking. It's just strange to me. I've never had this happen, but I don't know. Let me try it again.
Never say never.
I know, right? Um, stay part. Yeah, I don't know. That's so weird. But I mean, hopefully you all get the gist. I'm not sure why it's not working, but I hope you all get the gist of how it's configured at least. It's not difficult, but for some reason I'm not sure why this is taking let me go back to edit. I'm not sure why this is, and I'm starting to open too many tabs here. Man, that's strange. But to finish up, I mean, if anybody wants to ping me kind of like, offline and I can maybe send screenshots or something like that of how it's working, or if you have questions, if you want to set it up yourself and can get it to work or can't get it to work, I can possibly help out. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, the demo gods are against me right now, at least on that portion. But things happen. But going back. So, one of the things about cognitive services pros are is a low learning curve, quick integration. As you can see, you don't have to really. It's no coding. It's out of the box API calls in machine learning algorithms. It's part of Azure services, so essentially, you don't have to step outside of Microsoft tool sets if you needed to incorporate your applications or any other tools that you use, via Microsoft, or if you're a Microsoft shop. There's constant updates and improvements constantly. It's the same as like Power BI. There's always, every month there's something new, or they're making updates or tweaks somewhere. And there's also forums and different things the same way that Power BI has, where you can vote on different things. Like if there's a functionality that you would like to see, you can vote on it. So I really love that the community aspect of it. And some cons are it's because it's out of the box and no coding, it's limited to machine learning models that are provided. And I actually do have a recap slide that shows it, but that's really the only con that I see. So if you're someone who's heavy into Python or heavy into R and machine learning algorithms and like tweaking different things or building your own, it may not be for you, because you probably can build something on your own and then, you know, create your own REST API call to it, but you know, or incorporate it some other way. But it's really for out of the box quick solutions, and it's pretty accurate. But if you need to manipulate that, that would be pretty hard to do, obviously, because it's not exposed. This actually is what it would show up, how it would show up here. And you can see this was a screenshot I took. Like I said, I live on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. It's a city called Monroeville. So here are some different restaurants that were near me. And again, this was the button and how it was configured. And I did show this, and I blanked out the key, but obviously I showed it here. So, but not really that big of a deal. If I need to terminate or regenerate keys, I can do that. But you know, same concept here. So last slide for scaling and enhancements. Obviously you can add additional screens to this. You can do all kind of different things. Like I said, there potentially is SDK support. So we could add SDK functionality for turn by turn. I don't really like the error handling in Powerapps. That's one thing I don't like. One of the things that I had noticed when there were errors in my apps, at least to start, and I haven't really used it on the, actually they may have fixed it, because when I called it up on my phone, I didn't have this issue. But when there's one error, it makes your whole screen red instead of just a red X like it does in the design studio. So it looks like they may have fixed that, because being that I do have an error with the API key, when I opened it up from my phone, it did not show me that. So they may have fixed that. But you know, so maybe I can remove that bullet point now. But that was a gripe that I did have. Here's a reference slide that basically has links to some of the how to create like static maps, and it shows you how to configure those, how the API calls are made. There's a blog that I actually found that was pretty cool about sending text messages, where it doesn't do it doesn't use Power Automate. It actually will use the message app on your phone. But there was a limitation to it, and that's why I didn't actually use it. And I also wanted to show the flexibility of calling a Power Automate flow, so that's why I didn't choose that. But I did leave that out here in case anybody's interested in other ways to do it. And you know, there's, you know, other things, you know, other things that I've talked about throughout this presentation that you can reference, you know, here and get answers to. Obviously, if you need to reach out to me, you know, Steve's going to be making this public as well. So my Twitter handle is on there. Steve has that information as well. And my LinkedIn profile is on there as well. So with that being said, I know we went pretty long today, so I apologize if I'm holding anyone else up. But, you know, if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thanks for the attendees for joining our meeting today. And I guess we'll see you next time.
Sounds great. Thanks, Steve, for having me, and thanks everybody for attending. Sorry I couldn't get the cognitive services piece working, but hopefully at least you got a gist of how it works. But yeah, hopefully I'll fix that. If anyone needs anything, definitely don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Bye.
It was awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sure,
Thank
anytime.
you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.